Hey everybody, and welcome back to Project 224, where we are committed to applying the true knowledge and wisdom found only in Christ to the everyday world around us.
Hey everyone, we are back. Hayward is trying to sabotage me.
I tried to get you to laugh. I was really trying to think, well, what can I get him to do to laugh?
I saw what he was doing, and I put...
You know what's funny? I almost hit my head on the mic. Like I was trying
He was rocking out to that beginning, and it started to...
Eventually we'll have to do like our podcast on YouTube or something so people can see what we do and stuff. Someone actually asked me about that. Like, have you guys thought about it? And I was like, well, once we get sponsored by somebody and they send people over and film us, it'd be great.
I mean, there's probably a way we could do it.
Yeah. We could probably have your kids sit there with with your phone and just holding it up.
That wouldn't work.
Yeah, that's true.
My son loves to hit the home button and then just go to things he doesn't.
It'd be him the whole time.
Daniel Tiger would come on. Let's all be real. What would happen?
Or that shark song that everybody listens to. Oh my goodness.
Okay, so we make fun of that as a kids thing, but I kid you not. So somebody said, like, 20 years from now, you're going to be sitting in the club and someone's going to start dropping Baby Shark. Yeah. And I'm like, so I go on YouTube just to see, like, and I put in, like, Baby Shark in a club.
Yeah.
It's
no.
Yeah.
With a beat behind it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
I mean, it's total, like...
I should have done that.
Baby Shark. You're like,
I didn't think about that, like making a remix to it.
Dude,
I think it would have been...
You should do it, publish it, and then it'll be like a wedding song.
Yeah. Like, I've thought about... Because I do so many weddings, I've always thought, I need to come up with a song that's simple, tells people what to do, like right foot, two stomp, like stuff like that. It's like, I'd come up with some... I don't know what I would do, but I just need to come up with a song that's simple. And you know how much money you'd make off something like that? And then I could sponsor the podcast.
Absolutely.
Off of that song.
Because there's so many people that need to be taught how to dance because they literally have no idea what to do.
That's why people jump up when that song comes up. It's like, I could do this.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the easiest thing.
Right foot, two stomps?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Boom. Turn to the left. Turn to the left. It says it twice in case you forget. Turn where? To the left. But still nobody knows how to Charlie Brown. It's like Charlie Brown. Everybody's looking at each other like, what is that?
I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, it's great.
So,
how was your Easter?
Easter was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. We took a week off there, and it's always a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's good to be with our church and just celebrate. If it wasn't for just the resurrection and the crucifixion of Christ and just what happened during that time, we wouldn't have what we believe. We wouldn't have our faith. So it's always good to just have that time, and especially to be a family and friends and just have that time of just reflection,
Yeah.
And it's good. I know we say this a lot, and churches say this a lot, but let's be honest. Christmas and Easter are usually the two times that people come to church if they don't come to church.
Right.
So it was just encouraging to, have people there. And so.
Yeah, it's always a good time. Now, I mean, just a real quick rabbit trail. How is it for you as a worship leader? Like, because there's the pressure of, like, it's Easter, don't screw up.
Yeah, it's busy.
But there's also that sense of, like you're worshiping. Like, this is a personal thing for you. You know what I mean?
Right,
like,
yeah. So I've had to learn over the years to not be so caught up in the nuances of what's happening on stage, because not just singing and playing guitar, but you're thinking of, okay, are the drums going to come in here? Are keys starting the song on time? Is this happening? Is this happening? Plus, our I guess I can say this because I think everybody would agree, but our best player on stage, our keyboardist, wasn't there for Easter, and so even having to work around that. But we have a great team, so you just have to learn to. One thing I always tell people when they become a part of the praise team, or I just have people on stage, because they get nervous when you get up on stage, you see hundreds of people.
Yeah,
you don't realize what it's like being the other side, and I just tell them, you know what, practice is over. Just set all that aside, and now you just worship.
Yeah,
and just think of it as you're just worshiping, and everybody else is just in the room with you. I said we're all up here together, and it just makes it easier, and it's freeing. So. But at the beginning, I did, I took so much stress upon myself.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, if no one's raising their hands or if no one's doing this,
yeah.
I don't think that much anymore. That way anymore. I just think, like, Lord, like, use me, and I just want to enjoy worship. And like I said, just happen that everybody else is in the room. So,
I mean, that's awesome. Because I mean, I bet you people just don't understand, like, the pressure that's on a person like you, because there's so many people who, like you said at other podcasts with Christmas, if you're not singing certain songs or, like there are expectations.
Yeah.
And to be a person who is gentle with those people, but yet you still are doing, you're still leading people and still wanting to worship the Lord. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and I do still have people, if we'll do hymns here and there, and people will come up and say, "Great job today, so glad you put some hymns in." And I want to be like, we did like 4 hymns a day. You just don't recognize it because it's different than what you grew up on.
Right.
It's the same lyrics, just different music. And so even that, people can get caught up in just what they're used to. If it doesn't sound this way, then it's not a hymn. No, the hymn is the lyrics. So you're still there. So
what'd be so funny is if like you did and I'm not saying you have to, I'm not putting any pressure, but if you did a thing where all the worship music were like actual psalms, just like put the contemporary music, and then people would be like, how come we're not singing any hymns anymore? And you're like, I thought we'd just sing the Bible.
Dude, there's some
be
good
like, oh, you haven't read that psalm, have you?
So there's some good songs out there where so interesting. We went to, I don't know if you know who Tori Kelly is.
I've heard. A
few weeks ago we went to her concert in Orlando, and she has an album out right now that is a gospel album.
Okay.
Great album. For those that don't know Tori Kelly, check her out. She got an amazing voice. She was actually did you ever see the movie Sing, the cartoon movie?
Yeah.
So she was the elephant.
Nice.
She was like the main character.
The elephant in the room.
She actually talked about it in the concert.
Cool.
But anyway, her voice is amazing, and she did a gospel album, and she said how she didn't know how people would receive it because they're used to her being a certain way. But man, the concert was awesome. She does a song in there, Psalm 42. As the deer, and it was so good. Such a good song, and she has a lot of good songs on that album. But during the intermission, or during the times where she would walk off the stage, it was an acoustic concert, so she had this guitar player with her, electric guitar player, and so it was just him. And as he's playing, I'm sitting there talking to some, like my wife and a couple other people I was with, and I'm realizing, like, wait a second, he's playing "Great Is Thy Faithfulness." He was literally playing it, just his guitar, "Great Is Thy Faithfulness." And then all of a sudden I could hear the crowd singing it. And I was like, this is awesome. And then he went from that, and you could see him smiling. He went from that to How Great Thou Art. But everything was just electric guitar. And it was like rocking out on it. And people were just singing the song with him. So all that to say.
Are you trying to tell me that you can worship the Lord with an electric guitar?
I am.
My goodness.
I am, yes. I am saying that. And yeah, we had to really teach our church that a lot. So you can worship with live drums and live instruments, and so
that's awesome. So, all right, well, speaking of pressure and what pressure causes, I think we're today answering a message to us. Somebody messaged us.
Woohoo! Thanks for messaging us.
And like we have a couple, so we might do other weeks on other ones, but depending on how many others we get. But this week, what I thought we'd go through is somebody asked us to give a kind of a biblical perspective of anxiety and depression and how to deal with it with yourself or with others or in the church. And I know that you did a great lesson on that for our group. So I thought that would be a great one for us to kind of address today.
Yeah. So thank you, first of all, whoever. Well, we know who it is, but we're not going to say who it is.
Right.
But thanks for sending that to us. I think it's a topic that. I think it's a topic. First of all, for those that listen to our podcast, know that there's a lot of we deal with a lot with young adults in our church, and it's a topic that comes up a lot, and not just with young adults. It comes up a lot now, more with adults who are just struggling with how do we deal with this, because. Let's be honest, a lot of places will say, if you have anxiety, then you're obviously in sin.
Yeah.
And one of the main things that I tried to hit on, and we'll jump into this, one of the main things I tried to hit on when I taught this lesson was that I don't want people to always, or to think all the time, now let me be careful how I say this, that because you're struggling with anxiety or depression that you're in sin. Now, it can lead to sin.
Right.
And you might be in sin. I mean, that might be a reason, but that's not always the case. And it's amazing when you look at some of the statistics. Because let's be honest, believers and non-believers struggle with anxiety. What was the statistic that you told me right before?
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it's close to 375,000 kids under the age of 5 are on medication for anxiety.
Wow.
And I think there's like 100,000 below the age of one or below, I should say, that are on medication for anxiety.
So how can a see in it? Okay, so
I don't even know.
you ask the question: Has a 1-year-old
I don't even know.
struggle with anxiety?
I don't even know.
I mean,
and I think and to be clear, and I think in this particular talk, definitions, as with everything, is going to be key. And I think one thing that people should understand is a term that sometimes we use, and it's going to be used in interchangeable ways per se, not that they're interchangeable.
mm-hmm.
So there's the anxiety of the feeling of anxiety, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's where you have the feeling of worry, nervousness, unease, typically be about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. So there's a feeling there, okay?
Right.
And those are anxiety feelings, and you may have an issue where those feelings come upon you a lot, okay? And we have to understand that those are feelings. So there's anxiety, and then there's the type of anxiety where you let those feelings affect your outcome, affect how you're acting, affect how you interact with other people, affect your relationship with God. So the feeling, and where we want it, the fact that you feel something doesn't make it sin. Okay. What happens is, what do you do with those feelings once you have them?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important delineation that we want to make, is because that's what we're saying, that you may have this feeling a lot, and that's not the sin. The sin is, what are you doing? Are you hiding from God from it? Are you not resting in all the things that we'll talk about later? How does it affect your behavior?
Right.
And I think that's what we're talking about when we get into the sin aspect part of it.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. And it's amazing when you think about how just some of the things about you get into mental illness.
Yeah.
And in our country today is a real thing. Now, when I was younger, if someone said, mental illness, I probably would have just laughed it off and been like, they need to get over themselves.
Right.
But the older I'm getting and the more I'm understanding it, it's a real thing. And I think it deserves prayer, us praying for those who struggle with this, and also a way for the church to, the church is already addressing things that I think we've waited too long to address, to be honest. And I think we're getting behind the 8 ball a little bit in some things. And I think this is another thing. It's like because if someone's coming from the world and they're walking into a church, and the church is saying, hey, come in here, like we give you hope through the gospel, we're giving you this, like there's peace, and someone's saying, well, I'm struggling from PTSD, or I'm struggling from depression, I'm struggling from anxiety, what can you give me? Well, we have a community group over here, or we have this baked good night over here, or we have this women's study. Well, yeah, but I need something right now because I don't know if I can make it through today. Okay, then how does the church address these things? Anxiety is one of the most common mental illnesses in the U.S., and it affects about 40 million adults ages 18 and older. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people. That's 18% of the population.
Yeah.
So for someone to say, like, get over yourself, man, shame on that. Like, there needs to be a way to approach this. And so that's why I appreciate this question. Now, I don't know if this person is struggling with depression or anxiety. They may know someone, I think part of it, there's many facets to it, and one of them is, I think you're very right. The church has not addressed this definitively. They have not nuanced it the way it needs to be, and so there's been created a lot of confusion. On top of that confusion, there's I think a little bit more of an insidious thing going on in our school system that has caused this to happen more, and that is what a lot of people don't understand is, in our public school system, part of the way that they get reimbursement for their system, so the way they get more money, and it's a significant amount more money, is if they can show that they're serving a population that has a certain type of handicaps or whatnot. Right.
Okay, so that's how all of a sudden you saw people. So for you to be successful, for you to get up the ranks a lot of times, and the thing is, how do you bring in more money? Well, one of the easiest things that you bring in more money is you go, well, we need to be a lot more stringent, or we need a lot more careful in diagnosing these things. And all of a sudden you see rates of ADHD, autism, anxiety, depression come up. Why? Because there is financial reimbursement behind that, and that allows people to advance in that.
Right.
Now, what I'm not saying, and hear me clearly, is that these aren't real things. Autism is real. PTSD is real. Anxiety is real. Depression is real. But the overdiagnosing of them has has created confusion in this. And so now the church is like, well, these people aren't, and they're both kind of talking past each other because the church is right in one sense. There's a lot of people that it's like, no, you just are sinning.
Right.
Okay. You don't need that. Where the public school system will then put forth people who do have truth as look at this, what are you going to say to them? And then the church doesn't have anything to say to that.
Right.
So they're both talking past each other, and we have to get a nuance of it to say, okay, these are real things. We've shown that there's some real things here. However, there's also no excuse for sin.
Right. Right. And it is interesting because in dealing with the church, and part of the question was from a Christian perspective. And so here's just a few types of anxiety disorders that maybe they may have. There's social anxiety disorder. There's generalized anxiety disorder. There's obsessive OCD. People know obsessive compulsive disorder. There's post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Those are just a few. But it's interesting when the different treatments, and one that you talked about, some of the options are therapy. Some people go through therapy, which I've heard helps. One is medication, which is the biggest, I would say, I don't know if argument's the word, but I think that's where the church is really split. There's some churches that say, do not medicate whatsoever. God will deliver you from this. There's that. Then there's some that say medication is just the way, that's the best way, just put them on medication. And then there's some that are in between. There's some that say, I think that's more where I would lean.
Absolutely.
I think that there's medication does help people because I've seen it help. Right. And I don't think taking medication's a sin. I think being dependent on that medication could be a sin.
Sometimes, in what I've told my wife, what I believe in this area is sometimes somebody is so wound up or so depressed that it's hard to even speak to them in that moment until they have a clear head.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what a medication provides is an avenue for you to speak to them to where maybe you can get them off that medication in the future, or maybe there truly is a chemical thing, and they've shown when it comes to different serotonins and epinephrines and some of these other medications, dopamines and whatnot, that there are effects there, and maybe we don't understand it scientifically yet.
Right.
But let me just caution people: you take a lot of medications, particularly in the world of cancers and others that they don't understand fully. That's why they a lot of times call them experimental, and yet people have no problem taking them.
Right.
So before you get too close on, well, science hasn't even, we don't even know what's going on. We're just throwing drugs at it. Yeah, we do that a lot in a lot of conditions. Why? Because we see that it does help people.
Right.
So that kind of needs to be put to bed. But sometimes the drug aspect, it can help you speak to that person truth and get them in a mindset where they can actually focus on what you're trying to get at them with. And then maybe it does. I'm a person coming from medical. I don't like anyone on any medication, but some medications are necessary.
Right.
Again, you shouldn't look to the medication to say, well, I'm going to sin unless I'm on this medication. No, God has helped you. God has given you things. There's no excuse for sin ever. And I want to be clear on that. There's no excuse for sin ever. However, let's say I have a headache, okay? And if you've just ever had a splitting headache, great. And my kids are sitting there going, daddy, 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 like they normally do. And I have a splitting headache and I yell at them.
Right.
Okay? I've sinned. No doubt about it. But at the same token, would you not give me a Tylenol so that my headache can go away and I can deal with them more patiently? Would that not be something someone would want to do? It's kind of the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
Like, sometimes you just give them a little bit of boost and they're able to do it a little bit more freely, but there's never an excuse for that sin.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm going to read something to you, and I want to get your thought on this, because again, when I was, when I talked about anxiety in our lesson one time, it really got me thinking about a lot, because there was a point when I shared this and I won't go into detail now, but there was a point where I was in depression, even in the ministry. This is only a couple years ago. And so I remember thinking to myself, like, I can't get out of bed. Like, I just can't, and then I thought to myself, okay, am I in sin? Because as a Christian, that's my first thought. Like, what did I do? What have I done?
Right.
And it, I'll be honest, it kind of brought me down more.
Yeah, but
because I couldn't find out what it was. It was almost like a Job type thing. I mean, I'm not comparing myself to Job, but just that mentality of like, okay, did I do something? And then I just didn't want to do anything. So anyway, someone asked John Piper, many of you know who John Piper is, and they asked John Piper, is anxiety a sin? And this is what he said, a part of this, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Paul. Because this is what Piper said. I mean, I hope the person who asked this question doesn't hear me say, yes, it is a sin, and respond, well, thank you. That is no help. Well, it is a help because I'm joining you in it. There is no human being on the planet besides Jesus who doesn't struggle with anxiety. All of us are flawed in our faith. If we were perfect in our faith, we would be anxiety free. And the more we mature in faith, the more anxiety free we are. But I don't think in this life there has ever been a person who, when faced with some new threat, some new danger, some new difficulty, doesn't have anxiety pop up in their life. And then, like the Psalm says in Psalm 56:3, when I am afraid, I put my trust in you. So there, in this transaction that goes on as we deal with the remaining corruption and unbelief in our hearts.
So my reaction to it is, number one, what I think he's talking about, two, is those, he's talking about both sides of that coin that I was talking about with anxiety. Number one is you have something come upon you and you have those feelings.
Right.
Okay, so those feelings are going to get you. What I want to say there is that is a function of sin in general. So the fall, depravity, human depravity. The whole reason we even have those feelings that are like that is because of the fall.
Right.
Okay. So sin in general has caused this type of anxiety, right?
Right.
When we're in heaven, there's not going to be any anxiety because there's no sin. Everything's perfect. There's nothing for us to be anxious for.
Right.
Sin has caused the anxiety in general. Then secondly, he's talking about that response that then becomes a sinful response that I think all of us have. And he's right. There is not a person on this life that has ever not responded at some point in their life wrongly that we would consider to be an anxiety. Right. So some of us may have more often, so more frequent we make those decisions, but at the same token, all of us should be able to identify. And for you to not, I agree with him. I can think of so many times in my life. You know, one of the struggles for me is money, in the sense of worrying, am I going to have enough to provide for my family? Because I see how easy jobs can just disappear.
Right.
I see how easy, and from our perspective, I don't know the future, so what's going to happen? Yeah. So that's one that I have to constantly fight. That when money comes around and maybe we spend a little more than we should have this month or something like that, I can feel the knot in my chest.
Right. Especially as a man and a husband and a father. Yeah.
My wife can see it in my face. She understands.
She's my wife's
like, here we go.
Right.
But what do I choose to do with it? And there's been plenty of times I've chosen not the right thing. And that's sin.
Yeah.
So we all struggle with this.
That's good. There was a situation you just reminded me recently with me and my wife and our family that I was just struggling. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I was just like, babe, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going on next. And I mean, we prayed like we've never prayed before. I mean, we were talking during the day, like, how do we pray through this? But, you know, just being honest, like I was like full of anxiety. It even showed a few weeks ago, I was on stage leading worship and people were coming up to me afterwards, like, are you okay? Like, I can tell you're not the same. And I was like, well, just got a lot on my mind. And I just started to really struggle. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, babe, if God doesn't deliver me from this right now, I can almost feel myself going on a path of like depression again.
Yeah.
And it was amazing how just spending that time in prayer, how God delivered us out of this situation where it was like, we both sat there that night that it happened. We're like, all we can do is pray. So we just sat there and just thank God in prayer. And it was just a reminder of God's faithfulness to his people. And so if you are struggling with anxiety, there's a deliverance there, right? Yeah. But you have to be faithful in that, like what you're saying. There has to be a understanding that, you know what, I am struggling. I'm at the end of myself, but I know that God will deliver me. Well, you have to believe that. You have to trust that. Yes, there may be some aids along the way, like you're talking about, medication, meeting with someone, stuff like that. But I think God is faithful. John 10:10, Jesus said he came to bring life to those who are in him, and not only bring life, but that they would have abundant life. If you're in anxiety and depression, you're thinking to yourself, okay, I don't feel like my life's pretty abundant right now. But these are the promises that God has. And you know what? You can't just depend on one promise and then blow off the rest of them. So if God promises that if you call upon my name, you will be saved, and you believe that as a believer, then you can believe this promise as well, that he came to bring life to those who are in him, and not just bring life, but abundant life.
Amen.
So if you're struggling with anxiety or depression, you may not be delivered from it today or tomorrow, next month, next year. but he will deliver you. And you know what? What's weird to kind of say, and this might be kind of morbid, it may not even be in this lifetime.
No. And that's what I wanted to tell people about is, what are my defensive approaches, or what do I do, or like when anxiety comes upon me, like, number one, think of the long game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just the short game. The short game is this life. The short game is what we have here. And even though I hesitate to use his name right now because he's affiliated with some people that I don't like, but Francis Chan, he had a great thing talking about how we're so worried about the first 80 years of an eternity of our life.
Is that the rope illustration?
Yeah. The rope illustration. And so that's so much of what we do. And guys, we're so worried about if we'll make it in this life that we don't understand that this life is just a precursor to eternity with God. What you have to understand, if you're saved, you've already won.
Absolutely. You've
won at life. You have not failed at life. You cannot fail at life.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, when you die and you're saved, you're going to get before the creator of the universe and hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant."
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you're going to hear. Okay. So you've already won. So the focus then is not am I going to win at life? The focus is then, am I pleasing Christ?
Right.
If I don't have any money and I'm sitting on a street, I haven't failed as a father, as long as I'm trying to get my kids closer to Christ.
Right.
As long as I'm trying to do things. Now, okay, that does include working hard.
Mm-hmm.
That does include doing everything that I can to provide for my family. But if I'm doing everything that I can to please God, I've won. It doesn't matter what the world says.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you guys will find this out. It's amazing to me. You know what no one's asked me in my job as a PA? What kind of grades you get in school? Nobody cared.
Right.
Nobody cared what my grades were. They just cared that I got certified.
Right. Yeah.
That's all they cared. So sometimes all those nights worrying like, oh man, I got to see what's that going to do for the rest of my life. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
Now there might be some jobs in medicine, and sometimes there are some times when it does matter, but in the long haul of things, so many things that we have. And someone's even compared that to when you look at a little kid, the worries that they have. I mean, they're worried about, does this person like me?
Mm-hmm.
And then as an adult, you don't see it as a big thing because you're like, in 20 years, you're not even going to know that person's name. I don't know that I can name anybody from my third grade class. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Right.
But back then, I thought that was like the biggest thing in my life. And that's what happens is we just deal with progressively larger and larger things. And that's what James is talking about, saying, count it all joy when you have various trials, know that testing your faith produces patience or endurance, and that endurance complete you because it's a progressive completion.
Right. That's so good that you said that, because I think it's important to, if you're listening and you do struggle with anxiety, like there is a patience. It's almost like a waiting sometimes. Yeah. And we're not all, especially as Christians, every day is not going to be all roses and sunshine.
No.
Let's be honest. A lot of times it's the opposite. But we have hope in Christ, which the world doesn't have. Here's a couple verses. If you're listening to this and you're struggling, maybe you have a pen, you want to write these down. Matthew 11:28-30. Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light."
Yeah.
There's so many ways that people struggle with anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? Relationships, we see it a lot in our ministry. Young people struggling in relationships, either friendships or dating.
Right.
After dating, like, should I marry this person? Well, if I'm not marrying him, how do I get out of this relationship in a way that's God honoring? There's so many things that happen there.
And dating is so much easier when you're a Christian, simply because if you have the thought of, if I'm supposed to marry them, there's nothing I can do to screw this up.
Yeah.
Like, it took me a while. And again, I didn't get married till much later in life. And so I had a little bit more of a mature outlook on that, just because of years of experience, not because I'm such a mature person. But when I was dating Kristen, of course I still wanted to be kind and treat her all the ways that God.
Right.
But at the same token, like, it was like, if I say the wrong thing, like, I'm just going to tell you my belief, because I'm not going to try to impress you in those senses, because if God wants me to marry you, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this doesn't matter.
Right.
I'm just going to tell you what's truly on my heart and endeavor to seek after God. Yeah. And this stuff, remember, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness.
Right.
All these other things will be added. It'll work out.
Yeah.
God's going to tell you. If that relationship doesn't work out, it's because God said that's not the person for you.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if you had married that person that wasn't for you, you wouldn't have been as happy because God's doing everything for his glory, and then that glory causes you the most joy.
Yeah, that's good. That's
So you married the right person, or you didn't. That's the thing is,
right.
Just have that. So a lot of those worries that we have today can simply be put in that pile. It's like, trust the Lord and go after him. These other things will work out. And most of the time, it's like people say, don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff is small stuff that we worry about, and the stuff that I worry about too.
Yeah.
So see the long game. See the game that you're in heaven. You've won at life. You're a co-heir with Christ, right?
Yeah.
And see that long game.
That's good.
And understand that God also wants you to have that joy, to have that peace. Like you said, John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give you, let not your hearts be troubled. So not peace that the world, but you have peace with God, the creator of this world that doesn't like you. Guess what? It's getting destroyed at some point. It is going away, and God's going to make all things new again.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. You're going to last. The world's not. So they're all upset at you, and you can just be like, okay, but y'all kind of don't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, you matter in the sense of I want you to be saved.
Right. Love thy neighbor as yourself. Right.
And all of those things, but you don't matter in the sense of your opinions.
Right.
The only opinion that matters is the one.
What God thinks of me.
What God. And we have peace with him. That's what Jesus said. You want to know God's opinion of you? He loves you. He's at peace with you.
Right.
And you're a child of his, a co-heir with Christ. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Rest in that.
And what a perfect way to attack, I guess attack's the word, attack that thought of anxiety and depression and struggling with that. A couple more passages. Psalm 55:22, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. Proverbs 12:25, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. And then 1 Peter 5:6-9, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that, this is important, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you.
So many times in our life, I think that we're trying to climb up this ladder to success.
Yeah.
And so our anxiety comes from, should I make this decision? Should I be friends with this person? What if I don't go out to this? Then I'm not going to be able to socialize with these people, and I'm not going to have opportunities here and there. And you're trying to lift yourself up, and it's like, humble yourself, follow God. He will lift you up to where you need to be.
Right.
You keep doing that, and God will put you where you need to be. I promise you.
Yeah.
I promise you that God will have you where he wants you to be, and then that space will be the space where you can have the most joy, because God's going to put you in a place that will most glorify him.
Yeah.
And in that glory, you will find the most joy.
That's good. That's good.
And okay, so let's say you just have anxiety. Let's say, okay, Paul, that's great, but that's not where I am. Right now, I'm struggling with anxiety. What am I going to do? Well, the first thing you need to do, I think, is talk with somebody. Talk with somebody who's mature and talk with them through your anxiety so they can try to parse out what might just be feelings, what might be sin, what might be things that you need to place on God. And because, like I said, anxiety isn't just a one issue, this is a cure-all. I think it is a multifaceted situation. Same with depression. They're both multifaceted conditions in which you're going to have to do multi-pronged approaches. And so you're going to have to see what's sin, what is just feelings that I'm going to have to learn how to deal with feelings,
right.
and what are things that I can preach to myself? What kind of truth can I preach to myself? So talk with somebody. And
I think it's important on that. I think it's important to maybe talk to someone outside of what you know.
Right.
You know, someone that you trust, but someone that doesn't know everything. Like some people will say, well, I've talked to my best friend about this. Yeah, but your best friend is, a lot of times, let's be honest, they're going to side with you a little bit on things that they may overlook. Go to a pastor, go to a ministry leader, go to someone that's older than you, perhaps, that may have some wisdom, but someone that you trust, that you know will not just feed you what you want to hear. Because let's be honest, if you're struggling with this, that's not what you need. What you need is someone that is going to lovingly take you in and share with you the truth of the word. Because again, this person asked from a Christian perspective.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. How do we as Christians? Well, there's just joy in that, and just having counsel around you, and just let's be honest, just asking someone for help. and for prayer.
Yeah.
Like I just need prayer in my life.
And,
That means the world to somebody.
And prayer is so important. And uh, you should be praying through all of this. I guess I assumed that the person had been praying, and I shouldn't assume that. Prayer is going to talk to the person who can affect change, right? Is God. He's the only one that can affect change in your life. So I was erring in saying that prayer is definitely needed, and then talking to someone, because God's the one that affects change, but God also works through means, and sometimes those means are going to be through wise counsel.
Right, absolutely. I know they also asked handling it with friends and coworkers. So if you have a friend or a coworker who's struggling with this as well, I don't think that there's anything that we've just said in these last few moments that you can't share with even a lost person.
Right.
If anything, share the gospel with them.
Absolutely.
Share with them these passages. Share with them the hope that's found in what Jesus was saying to those that I've come to bring you peace. I've come to take on your anxiety. I've come to be your joy. Someone in the world that's struggling with these things, anxiety, depression, they have nowhere to go.
I mean, they're not at peace with God. So let's talk about, they truly have something to be anxious about, and that's the fact that they're going to hell.
Right.
And as we said in a previous podcast a couple of weeks ago, they may not know that because they're suppressing that truth, but it's there, and they're in the soul, in the core of who they are. They understand that. So there's going to be some anxiety there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they truly have something to be anxious for, but yet you have the answer, and that's the gospel. So you can definitely, do some of these other things, but please, if you're talking to someone who's not saved, their core issue is the gospel. Please be giving them the gospel first, and tell them the God of hope.
Yeah.
The God of peace. Tell them of that God. You don't have to go, well, you should be anxious because you're going to burn in hell. Like, don't do that.
That won't work.
Tell them who their hope is. Tell them where you can put your peace. And
I think it's important too, if let's say your friends are struggling and you're not so much struggling with this, be a testimony to them in God.
Right.
And I'm not saying like show them everything's put together, because we're not all put together, but be an example and say, hey, I struggle with things too, but here's where my hope is. Right. Here's where my joy is. And then offer that to them as a way out. Because it is going to be different as a believer to an unbeliever. Psalm 56:3, the psalmist says, when I am afraid, I put my trust in you.
Right.
A lot of people, when they're in anxiety and depression, they're afraid. Like, they're afraid of waking up the next day. They're afraid of what's to come next. They're afraid. Well, Jesus is giving this invitation to come to him. We've read and talked about different verses. Put my yoke upon you, or put your yoke upon me. Like, let me carry your burdens. Let me be your peace. When you struggle, put your cares upon me. Put your weight on me. There's all these things that Jesus is pointing out to us. So I think this was a great question.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that's so common. I think one other thing that may be helpful too is know who you are, meaning know what triggers your anxiety. Like I told you, money does it with me.
Right.
Sometimes my kids can do it with me. Know what triggers you so you can be prepared. You don't go into a battle unprepared, right? So know what kind of enemy you may be facing and go into it. If you feel like there might be a situation coming, have a plan. Have a plan of, okay, this is going to happen, and then start preaching truth to yourself. But this is what I know.
Right.
I know God wants me to have a joyful life. How am I going to find joy in these moments? And start working through that. And you have a process. When you have a process, that's what gets. And then what you'll find is the more you go through this process, and you may need a physical checklist that you say, okay, the first thing I need to be doing is praying about this. The next thing I need to do is be thinking about the triggers. The next thing I need to be doing is saying these verses to remind myself of the gospel, remind me what God wants me. And the next thing I need to do is this. And then you go through that list. Eventually, you'll start to do it automatically. Yeah. It'll become habit. And that's kind of what you want to do, is you want to recreate a habit. Are you going to stop those feelings from ever coming on you? No. I'm sorry if that's what you want me to say. Feelings are you're going to have those feelings come upon you. What I can tell you is you will have victory in those feelings because of who Christ is. Amen. And that's what you want. You get the victory of those. The feelings will come, and it may be a momentary thing of like, oh, you feel that stress, and then you're able to have victory in that stress so it doesn't affect you. Yeah. That's what you should seek. I don't know that we could ever, because of depravity and the things of this of sin and how sin has affected this world, I don't think we can ever say that we'll never have a life where stress never affects us, or in the sense of we never feel it. We're always going to feel it.
Right. Yeah.
What do we do with it?
Yeah.
what do we do with it? So I think that's the big question.
That's good. Well, that was a great topic. If you have more topics you'd love to hear from us talk about, send them in. That's exactly what just happened with this person. They sent in a topic. We talked about it. Best we knew how, according to the word. So we'd love to hear more of those things. It's always a joy to hear from you all. Okay, so I guess we didn't do this last time, but there's a lot of ways to hear from us or hear us. Apple Music, Spotify, Google Music or Google Play.
I mean, you can go directly to the website from it, or
right.
And then there's a lot of ways that you can get a hold of us. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. So
Instagram. Email us. What was our email again?
project224podcast@gmail.com.
There we go.
All right. So all of that stuff is in the description below and in our show notes. So just, look below, get a way to get a hold of us, and we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Love you. God bless.